Hello and welcome to another episode of Pierre the Chef. We're starting a little bit late today because I got home a little bit late and then we're having some technical problems and we won't go into any details on that, but we think we've got everything worked out now, hopefully.
We'll see.
And we'll see. And as always, we have sporting the magnificent beard of magnificence, Steve, and me sporting the Pierre beard, Christopher, and I mean the Pierre beard by which it's not here right now.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, because Pierre is not here right now, and he's upset at us, and I don't think that he has a right to be on this case.
No, he is standing on he's not standing on very solid ground. I don't think.
He is upset because this is episode 15, even though the last one we did was 13, because we had episode 14 scheduled for March, and that ended up not happening. It fell through.
Yeah.
Steve had something come up. I had something come up. We weren't able to get there. Pierre actually showed up, and we weren't there. And now he's mad at us for missing an episode of Pierre the Chef.
Yeah, he's not happy with us.
I'm not sure he has grounds to be angry on this one. Just his track record is not good.
But he misses what, 12 in a row. We miss one, and now it's. I mean, I don't know if you've talked to him lately, but he's still on about it.
Yeah, so he's not going to be here, and he probably could be here, but he's just being cranky about it. So what are we going to do?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. I guess we could kidnap him, but abduction seems excessive.
Yeah. Plus we'd have to actually find him.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, who knows where he's even at? He's living in a tent outside wherever Gordon Ramsay is at the moment.
I'm thinking he may have learned his lesson on that.
His last experience in Ramsay chasing didn't end so well, so.
No. Oh, man. So before we get into the other topic of today's show, which is unfortunately a topic that's always topical, you were actually very busy yesterday.
Yeah, I had kind of a big day. It was Steve's big day. I went to Washington D.C., which isn't that big of a deal because I only live like an hour from there. But I went to the Secular Social Justice Conference, which was being held in Washington D.C. That was being put on by Secular Social Justice and Sikivu Hutchinson and Sincere Karabo, and co-sponsored by the American Humanist Association. And it was like an all-day, just a one-day event. And it was like going to social justice school. You know, it was wonderful. It was really wonderful.
It was everything that Skepticon wasn't.
Yeah, it was great because I love getting little glimpses as someone who is an atheist and who is extremely disillusioned with the mainstream of the atheist movement. It's nice to have events like that remind you that there is a corner of the movement that is filled with people who are still really, really interested and passionate about actually doing something worthwhile in society and not just sitting around and patting each other on the back for not being religious, you know?
Yeah.
It's really nice.
People who are actually interested in the underlying issues rather than just being smug and self-important.
Yeah, exactly. And it was especially nice, you know, there were people of all colors and all backgrounds there. There were a lot of us white folks there. But we behaved ourselves for the most part, I think. And it was interesting because while I was sitting
Well,
there,
I would hope hope you behaved yourself. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue there's such a thing as racist social justice.
Yeah, it's not. They don't go together, really, do they? He's an SJW, but he's one of the racist ones. But as I was sitting there, in between speakers, or when we would have little 10-minute breaks or whatever, I would check Twitter under the hashtag, and during people's speeches, if somebody said something I thought was really noteworthy, and it was like it worked for a soundbite, I would try to tweet it out real quick. And
you seemed uncharacteristically busy on Twitter yesterday.
Yeah, I was tweeting a lot of stuff.
Well, I don't follow you on Twitter, but I don't have Twitter. But they duplicate on
Yeah,
Facebook,
I
so
cross
I
post.
saw him there.
I cross post on Facebook because nobody's gonna miss what I have to say. And so, but there was this one person, and it was someone that I'm not familiar. I don't have no idea who they were, and I'm not going to because I muted them like as soon as I saw what they posted. But and they tweeted this under the SSJCon hashtag, where they said, I'm following the hashtag for this conference, and it just reminds me why I left. And they called it the Liberal Party. I don't know if they're British and they're talking about like the Labour Party, or if they said the Liberal Party. You know, maybe there's like a Liberal Party wherever they're from, but there is no Liberal Party in the United States. But they said it reminds me of why I left the Liberal Party, because all this is just hatred of white people. And I was racking my brains trying to think of like what was said during the conference that was hateful to white people. People talked a lot about white supremacy and about, you know, how important it is to recognize it and to oppose it, but I mean, and to try to dismantle it. But nobody said anything. I mean, all of the speakers were people of color, and a lot of them talked about racial issues, but nobody said anything remotely hateful to white people. I'm trying to figure out what this person thought that they read or whatever.
Some people get so used to their privilege that even the suggestion that they have it, much less surrender some of it, is seen as being an attack on them.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that, and you know, it's a shame, because to me it was a great time, and I learned a lot. I was a nice wake up call for me, because I learned a lot of terms that I didn't know, and I'm thinking, well, I'm a woke white person, you know, like why don't I know this? And it's just a reminder that, you know, as however much attention I'm paying to these issues, I can always be paying more attention, and I can always be learning more and doing more than I'm doing, and it was good. It was a good, you know, like,
yeah, things like this never reach endpoint. If you reach endpoint, you just stop learning. Once you have stopped progressing or learning, once you've reached, you know, the endpoint of how far you're going to go, you're no longer an asset to whatever issue it is.
Exactly.
You're the one that everyone's trying to push past and move beyond. You're the obstruction.
Yeah, exactly. It's a process. You know, it's one of the last speakers, Whitney was her first name, and I'm kicking myself that I can't think of her last name, but she said almost exactly that. She said liberation is a practice. It's not something that is ever complete. You're always doing it. You know, and once you reach one milestone, there's always something beyond that you have to press towards. Like, it's nothing that is ever going to be completed in anyone's lifetime. And that's another thing that maybe some people have a problem with, because we like closure. We like being able to say, oh, okay, we passed that law, or we won that election, or we had that protest, and all right, let's go home. And, you know.
Yeah, I've said that a lot. That's a large part of the problem, that on the conservative side, no matter what happens, they never start pushing for what they want. Yeah. And on the more progressive side, there's this tendency to win a battle and then go home for a while and pat yourself on the back and say, we've done good. And, you know, Obama won the election. We're like, yes, we've won. We've won. And we went home. And then 2 years later, it's a fully Republican Congress, and nothing got done for 6 years.
Yeah.
You know?
And all the activists are like, wait, come back. Like, no, we need you to come back, please. We're not done yet. But I voted. No, come on.
So you got to keep pushing. You can't just say that it's done, because it never is. The moment you stop pushing, things start getting rolled back, as we are seeing now.
Yeah, exactly. Because like you said, the other side never stops. And, you know, and there was another, it's a thought that has occurred to me fleetingly over the years. And it's something I may have articulated something like this in the past, but it occurred to me as I was sitting there listening to these speakers and taking it all in, that it really is just extraordinarily short-sighted and selfish to be a conservative, just period, because you're basically saying things are good enough, you know, and all the other people who are saying, but things aren't good enough for us, we're still experiencing inequality, you know, you're basically saying, oh, well, you don't matter.
Things are good enough for me.
Yeah, things are good enough for me, so let's keep things the way they are. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I think one of the main topic we wanted to discuss in today's show is another one of those evergreen topics that no matter, especially here in the United States, it's tied into it. It's tied into a larger topic that is something that we will probably be dealing with for the rest of our lives in the United States, which is gun violence, and specifically school shootings, and the charming suggestion that instead of protesting for gun control and reforming our gun laws, these students who are surviving school shootings should walk up instead of walking out.
You know, and I posted a video about this actually yesterday. I don't know if you've seen it or not, because you've been a little busy with.
I haven't had a chance to see it yet.
But yeah, I didn't really get into a lot of detail on walk up not out in that, because I didn't want to go over long and start rambling and get off point, because I know how I can get sometimes. And this is certainly an issue that you go on for an hour or two about without even repeating yourself, because it's just so absurd, the situation that we're in. But the whole walk up not out thing is sort of a way to blame the kids for what's happening.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a way to pass responsibility. The whole concept of, well, if you were just nicer to them, then you wouldn't get shot. I mean, how sick is that?
Yeah.
That's America is, our culture is fabulous for victim blaming.
Oh.
It's not it's not that the person attacked you, it's what you did to provoke them. You know, it's just so absurd. And speaking as somebody who was never one of the popular kids in high school, having people come up and do this whole walk up not out thing would be, as somebody who might have been approached on something like that, as not a popular kid, I'd have to think that would be something that would be condescending and patronizing and transparent as all hell. There's not a hint of genuineness to it.
We think you might try to hurt us someday, so we're going to be nice to you. You know.
Or even directly asking, "You're not planning on shooting us, are you?"
Yeah. And that's the other thing, right? Do you really? I mean, these Parkland kids are amazing, but
oh yes, I cannot say enough good things about them.
They're tremendous, but they're you know, do you really want to trust high school kids with this? I mean, there are some extraordinary high school kids, and I'm not trying to shit on teenagers, because they don't get nearly as much credit as they deserve. But there are just as many dipshit teenagers as there are dipshit adults. And do you really want to just turn this over and say, okay, kids, stopping the next school shooting is up to you. We're going to trust you to intervene sensitively and effectively with the potential, shooters. It just, it just, the suggestion fails on every level. And what pisses me off about it is that it's yet another example of these right-wingers who just want to abdicate their responsibility and say, look, it's not our job to handle this. It's not our job to fix this. Stop asking us to fix it.
One of the points I make in the video is that this should not be the kids' problem, but they've inherited it from the adults who have spent a generation doing absolutely nothing about it.
Yeah.
And it's unfair to them, and then it's even more unfair once they start doing something about it to complain that they're doing it wrong or that they should do something else. It's like, I think the phrase that I used in the video was, you have no right to complain about kids being on the front lines of gun control when you are perfectly happy to put them on the front lines of gun violence.
Yeah, exactly. And you're perfectly happy to craft gun laws in such a way that benefits gun dealers and gun manufacturers and gun owners. That's completely okay with you. You consider that to be part of your responsibility as a legislator or whatever you are. But when people who are being shot by firearms say, what about us? Maybe write the laws with us in mind. All of a sudden it's, oh, no, you need to find another way to deal with it.
Yeah, and the concepts that are being put out there by adults don't do anything to actually address the issue of school shootings. It's not preventative. It's how do you kill the shooter faster?
Yeah.
They want to put armed guards in schools to shoot back faster. They want, they're giving kids buckets of rocks in every classroom.
Oh, God, that drives me up a wall. That
And that's
story just,
relatively local here. Yeah, that's
yeah.
just, it's mind blowing. And then you've got, his cerebral phosphorescence, Rick Santorum, suggesting that we should give kids CPR lessons. It's like I've said, after Sandy Hook, some of the parents of those 6 and 7 year olds the kids were so devastated by the gunfire. The parents were only able to identify their own children by the clothes they were wearing.
Yeah.
CPR is not a solution to that, not even remotely.
No. And the thing about the Santorum thing is that he actually he walked back the CPR thing, but that's the only part of what he said that he rescinded. The most disturbing thing that he said to me, and the CPR thing is just utterly ridiculous and insensitive and terrible and is misinformed and just everything. But he also, in that same appearance, he said, they need to stop looking to other people to solve their problems.
Which is what
they're elected legislators. That's what we hire these people to do. That's what you voted. So getting involved in the political process now all of a sudden is asking other people to solve your problems?
Well, Rick Santorum is the sort of person who didn't become a politician to help other people.
That's the understatement of the decade.
But there's also the contradiction inherent in complaining about kids wanting other people to solve their problems and then complaining about the kids who are taking steps to solve the problem.
Yeah. Okay, don't ask us to fix the problem. You fix the problem. Wait a minute. No, not like that.
Yeah. It reminds me of the whole thing about people protesting against racial inequities and saying, well, why can't black people protest in a way that's not violent or is peaceful or is non-disruptive? And so then black football players started kneeling during the national anthem, and they got all up in arms because even though this was everything that they said they wanted protest to be, that wasn't it either, because they just want protest to go away and not have to see them or think about them.
Exactly. They want the people who are protesting to somehow convince themselves that it's not worth protesting and just go away so that they can leave things just the way they are. I mean, that's really the root of it. I mean, well, and I have friends who are, we both have friends who are involved in, and family members who are involved in public schools and who are teachers or employees for public schools in other ways. And and because of that, I've been aware that there have been lots of local school districts for a long time who have been trying to implement, policies to combat bullying or to help kids who are maybe being alienated or at risk for acting out or whatever. And I never heard Rick Santorum say shit in support of that. You know what I mean? I never heard any of these walk up, not out people say anything on a national platform about the importance of combating bullying in schools or the importance of creating like a healthy, positive, welcoming, inclusive community in schools. In fact, when college students try to do that, they get attacked for it.
Right.
But somehow now it's like, whoa, you just have to make friends with the bullies. Oh, okay. So now you're anti-bullying because you think it's something you can use to shut people up about gun control. But for the last 20 years, when people have been trying to fix school bullying, you're just completely missing an action on the issue.
Anything like the so-called men's rights activists who will try to make arguments like, well, men get raped too, but you never hear them make that case anytime except when they're trying to shut down discussion about women.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you don't care about this issue. You're just pretending to try to shut down another one.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why nobody who actually cares about the issue takes you seriously, because anybody who's informed on the relevant issue sees through that act immediately. They're talking to people who are just as ignorant as they are and hoping that they can win them to their side. And anyone who has actually been paying attention can see through that immediately. And that's what happened with the walk up, not out thing. It's like, well, you don't care about bullying. You don't care about kids. You don't care about education. You've never said anything in support of any of those things. You've, in fact, tried your damnedest to dismantle and hurt all of those things. And now all of a sudden you're pretending to care about it because you think someone's going to fuck with your ability to go buy a gun whenever you want.
There's this... So many of these things just don't even pass basic logic. I mean, how does... Like, one of the things that they're talking about is arming teachers in school.
Yeah.
And then they're talking about, well, let's talk about that for a moment.
Let's.
How exactly would that work? Serious questions about that. I mean, if this is a proposal, let's have something more than just give teachers a gun and hope for the best. Who would have? Would it be any teacher, every teacher? Or do you only want certain teachers, like ones who are proficient or trained? And if you're only okay with giving guns to teachers who are proficient or trained, why are you against that limitation for everyone else?
That's a great point. If only the trained, safe teachers can have guns, then why is it a free-for-all outside of school?
And then you have the questions of, like, what are the guidelines on this going to be? And one of the big questions is, would a teacher be allowed to shoot first?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
yeah, it's like the question of, well, do you wait until the kid has fired, in which case you're not really stopping a school shooting, you're just trying to end it faster, but you're still going to have somebody dead? Or does the teacher open fire first, and maybe it's not a gun, or maybe it's not a real gun, and then you have you want to have the teacher deciding who lives and who dies at that level?
Yeah, you want to make teachers into police, and we know how well that's been working out in the United States.
20 shots into a black person holding his cell phone in his backyard.
Yeah. So let's import that into public schools.
Only with people who aren't trained.
Yeah. Well, and you see, that brings that there. What it makes me think of is, again, they don't support teachers. Like the Republican Party, the Conservative,
no.
They don't support public school teachers at all. They're enemies of the teachers union. They're enemies of public schools in general. They want to take funding from public schools and funnel it into private schools and religious schools.
Well, as Karl Rove once said, if education is good unless people get too much education to become Democrats.
Yeah,
which is something that he actually said. He suggested that better educated people become Democrats. So that gives you some idea of the motivation behind the war on education. Yeah. Keep people dumb, and they'll continue to support the party.
And that's education's fault, I guess. Educators should feel bad about that. That, as Stephen Colbert once said, reality has a well-known liberal bias.
It does.
But yeah, I mean, it's shocking. It's brazen. And it's pathetic, and it's shameful, that they say all that. Well, let's arm teachers. Oh, really? The teachers whose pay you want to cut, the teachers whose union you want to smash, the teachers who are already in many cases in some rural districts and inner city districts and low income districts that don't have funding because for some reason we got the bright idea that schools should be funded with local property taxes, which means that schools that are established in low-income areas don't have as much money as schools in other areas. So they're underpaid, they're overworked, they don't have supplies, and now you're saying, oh, by the way, we want some of you to carry guns because we don't feel like dealing with school shootings.
We want you to shoot kids.
We want you to, yeah, we think the best solution in the United States of America, the best solution we have come up with is we need to let teachers start shooting kids.
I love the fact that these are the teachers who they are harassing and vilifying and, dare I say, bullying, and then let's give them guns.
Yeah, we're going to push the teachers to the breaking point, and then we're going to give them guns. Yeah.
That will end well. The fact that these political organizations and even the NRA, when they have certain public forums, ban firearms within the room where these things are happening tells you what you need to know about how safe they are.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, how can you insist that guns make you safer and then the NRA refuses to let guns into their own forums?
Yeah, what's wrong with having a building full of 5,000 good guys with guns? Isn't that the safest possible scenario?
Not according to them. Yeah. Not according to the insurance companies either, because actuaries are not bound by political; they're bound by profit. And statistics on what is dangerous, what the chances of certain things are, and they know that a gun in the household very much increases the likelihood that a member of the household is going to get shot.
Yeah, which only makes sense if you think about it. I mean,
which many of these people have not.
The presence of a firearm significantly increases the odds that there will be a firearm-related injury.
Yeah, it's like arguing that, alcohol has nothing to do with drunk driving, or that, water is not a factor or a component in drownings. This is common sense.
Yeah, like what's the common denominator here? Is it all these other things that people are trying to force into the issue, or is it the guns? And what is it about the United States that is so different from so many other comparable countries that are developed economically and industrially at the same level that we are, have the similar economies, similar standards of living, who don't have these gun violence problems, who don't have even a fraction of the gun death rate that the United States has? And what is the difference? Could it possibly be the guns? Like, maybe.
And again, it's a minority of people who are causing the problem for the majority, because we're not quite there, but we're nearly to the point where there's almost as many guns in the United States as there are people.
Yeah.
And that's people from newborns up to, people are 100 years old. It's not quite 1-to-1 yet, but it's close. And about half of those guns are owned by 3% of the people.
Yeah, exactly. Most Americans don't own guns, but
I don't understand the concept of owning 20 guns. You can't, I mean, and you're going to claim that you're doing it for self-defense, but can you fire 20 guns at the same time?
Yeah. Do you imagine you're going to be like Neo in the Matrix and you'll just have them strapped to you? And I won't even have to reload. I can just throw the guns away and grab more. Like, okay, buddy, that's good. Good luck with that.
I mean, if you're talking about, if everyone believes that they're the good guy with the gun.
Yeah.
How does common sense gun control, how does requiring a competence test, if you're good, if you're a competent guy, why would that be a problem for you? What is the danger to you of requiring people to prove that they are actually proficient and competent to use a gun?
Yeah. Considering the potential consequences, which we should all be terribly familiar with by now. Like, yeah, what is so wrong? Well, and here's the thing. In other activities that are firearm related, you like in the state of Maryland, I don't know what the law is now, but when I was a kid, you had to take like a 9-hour training, a 10-hour training course to get a hunting license. But in some states, you don't need to take any kind of training course to own a gun. So,
no, in fact, a couple of years ago, Pennsylvania lowered the age for requiring, or lower the age at which you're allowed to use a firearm to hunt to, if I recall correctly, age 6.
Oh my God.
I wish I was making that up, but I'm not.
God. That's funny. Last night, we watched the movie Shane, because that's the movie that the podcast that I co-host, we're reviewing the movie Shane for our next episode. And there's a scene in Shane where there's a young boy, and they never say his age, but he looks like he's maybe 8 or 9, the kid in Shane, for those of you who've seen the movie. And he has a little toy gun that he plays with, and it's a Western. It's like in the 1880s or something. And he has a little toy gun that he plays with, and he has a little rifle that he carries, like it's a real gun. But it's not loaded. And there's a scene where the father, takes the gun away from the kid, and he's talking to the main character, whose name is Shane. And he says, "Oh, don't worry, mister, it's not loaded. Little Joey's too young to carry a loaded gun." And I just had this thought of this Western made in 1953 that depicts people living in the 1800s somehow has a more sensible attitude toward guns and children than the people who support this law that would allow 8-year-olds to shoot with guns. It's just amazing.
And a lot of the gun laws and gun control laws have a very racist component underneath them that is not talked about much or is not widely acknowledged. But back during the '60s, when the Black Panthers were arming themselves and working to protect themselves against racist groups like the Klan, all of a sudden there was a whole bunch of gun control being pushed for by the NRA to try to keep guns out of the hands of black people. And the FBI stepped in and largely destroyed the Black Panthers while the Klan continued just fine. But now, a lot of people, I've seen a couple of things that have said, you want to see gun control? Have every black person go out and apply for a license for firearms of that nature, and you'll have gun control the next day. Oh, and yeah. I think there's a lot to that, because it's even, and I'm trying to remember. I don't remember the details. I say even a lot of the Second Amendment, a lot of that was motivated through racism and the slavery that existed at the time, and wanting that law to continue to be able to control slaves. But I'm not familiar with all the details on that. I've read up on it, but I don't remember it real well right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to see the racial inconsistency in the NRA, I mean, just look at how they reacted. I remember a couple years ago when there were restaurants or convenience stores, or there were small businesses that had banned people openly carrying firearms from coming to their stores. They were like, it makes people feel unsafe. Like, we don't want people openly carrying guns around our establishment. It's not cool with us. And the NRA was real quick to jump in and be like, they have a right. It's the Constitution, Second Amendment, blah, 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 you know?
But I have the right in the store that I own not to be worried that I'm going to get shot.
Right, exactly. But when...
That's a right that is not explicitly stated in the Constitution, so apparently no one's backing that one.
But when Philando Castile, who was a licensed gun owner...
this is what we talked about at the time, I think, when we went over this issue previously.
Yeah, was murdered by a cop, and he did everything right. He told the cop that he had the gun, and like he said, I just want to inform you that I have a gun in the car. And it turned out it was a legal licensed firearm, and he gets murdered by this cop. The NRA says absolutely nothing. No outrage at all that this licensed gun owner was gunned down by a policeman, when he was no threat, and he didn't even, as far as we know, even try to use the gun for anything. And, there's crickets. But when white people pretending to be Rambo, want to carry a gun on their hip when they go to 7-Eleven because it makes them feel like a big man, and the manager says, no, don't bring that gun in here. All of a sudden now the gun lobby has to step up and look out for the rights of honest, hardworking, gun-owning Americans. It's fucking ridiculous, and it's transparent as hell.
Well, the NRA, I mean, if a foreign organization was responsible for as many deaths that occur in the United States each year as are caused by gun violence, we'd be at war with someone. The NRA really is fundamentally it's supposed to be a gun safety organization. It's become a gun lobbying organization, which is completely different. And functionally, it's a white supremacist terrorist organization.
Yeah.
That's not what it used to be, but that's what it's become over time.
I don't see how that's that much of an overstatement. I mean, they say nothing about black lives that are taken by gun violence, or if they say anything about it at all, it's to blame black people for it, and to say, oh, it's gangs and inner city crime and blah, blah, blah. They take no responsibility whatsoever for the role that they have played in the proliferation of firearms in this country. Like you said, we're getting close to one gun per person in the United States. And I just want to add to that, we don't actually know, because we don't know for sure how many guns there are in the United States, because they're not allowed to keep track of it.
Yeah, they're not allowed to keep track of it. They're not allowed to keep statistics on gun violence.
Yeah.
Is it the Center for Disease Control of Public Health is not allowed to keep any official information on gun violence?
Yeah, well, they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to. The Dickey Amendment specifically says they're not allowed to use any of their funding to promote gun control. And what that has effectively been interpreted as over the years is just don't do research into gun violence, because everybody pretty much knows what or at least they have a good educated guess as to what the conclusion will be if they take a careful long-term study of gun violence. Gee, I think maybe a good solution would be getting rid of a lot of these guns, you know. Because of course that's the solution. Like, again, this isn't implementing the solution will be incredibly difficult because of the situation we're in, but the solution itself is fucking obvious. Like, it's not, we're not going to get there easy, but it's the guns. There's too many goddamn guns, and it's too easy to get your hands on them.
And the whole thing about, well, criminals will still get guns. Yes, no one is denying that. Nobody is arguing that point. Nobody is saying that this is going to be 100% successful and there will never be a gun shooting again. But it does, the idea is to reduce it. We're not going to eliminate it, but we can reduce it. If we could cut shootings in the United States in half, we have 30,000 deaths by gun in the United States each year on average. Yeah. So that works out to nearly 100 a day. And if you could reduce that by half, it was 15,000 instead of 30,000 a year. Are those 15,000 lives worth it, or are those 15,000 people you're expendable, so you don't have to sign a couple papers and prove you're competent before you can walk out of the store with a gun?
Yeah.
The goal is not to abolish guns. The goal is not to completely eradicate gun violence or gun homicides or gun suicides. Yeah. It's to minimize it. It's to lower it. It's to try to make it so that it's not so goddamn easy.
Yeah, and I mean, people who are on the pro-gun side, I think, you know, one of the more manipulative and diabolical things that the NRA does is they represent one of the safest groups politically in the country. Like the gun owners are one of the most politically safe groups in the country. Even if the impossible were to happen and the Second Amendment were to be repealed, I don't think we will ever see any kind of blanket ban on private gun ownership in this country. It'll just never happen. So,
but you wouldn't even need to repeal the Second Amendment, because somehow well-regulated militia has been interpreted as completely unregulated populace.
Yeah, exactly.
You just have to use the words that are actually in the Constitution, in the Second Amendment, and you could address a lot of this just by reading it the way it was intended, as opposed to the bizarre interpretations that people have come up with to try to defend everyone having, you know, nuclear bazookas and God knows what.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, if you look at the way the Second Amendment has historically been interpreted until the last 40 years or so, and also look at the laws, federal laws even, that are on the books now, that regulate or outright ban private ownership of certain guns, not of all guns, but of certain guns, like fully automatic weapons. You're just, in most cases, you're just not allowed to have those. You just can't have them. The law says, sorry, you can't have a machine gun. That's the law, you know. And if we're willing to accept that is allowable under an interpretation of the Second Amendment, then how is it then completely out of question to say, and let's also maybe require licensing or training? You know, we're not saying that you're not allowed to own a gun. We're just saying you need to reach a certain threshold.
Yeah, like we do with cars.
Safety, yeah.
Where you have to license and prove that you're competent, you know, and that's been in place for a long time, and cars haven't been banned.
No, in fact, more people have them than ever.
But but the roads are safer than they were in the past because there's more restrictions and more competency required, and they're a bit stricter on certain things like drunk driving, which was once seen as not as big a deal, you know. But public opinion on that has changed, and the roads are safer for it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, eventually we're going to have intelligent, fully automated self-driving cars. Maybe we need to have self-shooting guns that just know when it's not okay to shoot them at people. You know, we're like so if a cop pulls a gun on an unarmed civilian and tries to shoot, the gun is just like, nope. That's not, nope, I can't do that. And then the gun a little finger comes out and wags at the cop and goes, shame on you. Look at what you almost did.
Can we give it Kit's voice from Knight Rider?
I'm afraid I can't shoot that gentleman, Michael. That's a phone in his hand.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing though that we need to at least mention, because I certainly
Kit Knight Rider.
Yeah, Kit. Kit is not mentioned in nearly as many gun violence discussions as he needs to be. No,
bulletproof cars. That's what we need to do. We need to make the entire world bulletproof. We can't do anything about the guns. We just have to put everything in Kevlar.
Yeah, or the molecular bonded shell, that wonderful bit of bullshit doublespeak that they came up with to explain Kit. Like, oh, his skin is a molecular bonded shell, Michael. It's completely
that nobody actually knows what it is.
Yeah, like what? Well, it's like in comic books when in the Fantastic Four, Reed Richards, everything is made out of unstable molecules. That's why their costumes don't rip or whatever. It's like, oh, unstable molecules. What's that? Oh, it's just thing. I made it up. Look, just shut up. It's a bullshit nerd explanation, so just leave it be. But no, I mean, I'm guilty of this myself, which is we talk a lot about gun control and reducing the number of guns in the population, and I sincerely think that is incredibly important. But parallel to that, we also need to demilitarize the police and teach police how to de-escalate situations, and because that is a legitimate concern that people from communities of color or other marginalized communities, when they say, so okay, if we reduce the number of guns in the general population but the police remain unreformed and they're the only ones that have guns and they're shooting way too many innocent people, now what's going to happen then? So it has to be a parallel. You can't just take guns away from private citizens and leave them even more at the mercy of unstable, reckless, irresponsible police as they are now. You need to de-escalate that situation too.
Well, and the whole related thing, there have been studies that show that there is a lot of white supremacy in law enforcement.
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's white supremacy in every nook and cranny of our society, but law enforcement is especially damaging for obvious reasons.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's I commented on somebody's on Facebook once. Somebody said something. I said that law enforcement appears to be the last bastion of acceptable white supremacy, and they got all bent out of shape. And so I posted a couple of links to things, and they didn't respond at all. But it's frightening when you see the story. I mean, we could do a whole thing about police violence too. Yeah. The way it's handled so differently. I mean, even the articles where they talk about how they treat victims and how they treat the shooters, and how if you see a picture of like one of the ones that went around is when Trayvon Martin got shot, they put pictures of him in a hoodie and they talked about criminal record, that he got in trouble for drugs. They were vilifying him even though he was a victim. There were photos of a white couple with Confederate flag who went by a black kid's birthday party, and they were driving past and shouting and waving guns, and they actually got arrested and convicted. And the photos that were in the paper were of the people who have been convicted crying in the courtroom and talking about their kids. They're humanizing the white people even if they're the criminals, and they're vilifying the black people even when they're the victims. And it's a very common mindset, and it's a sort of thing that you don't even notice happening unless you're explicitly looking for it.
Yeah, but then once it's, at least hopefully this is the case, once it's pointed out, you start seeing it everywhere. You become, it's like, oh my God, this happens all the time. Well, it's just like for me, when when Freddie Gray was killed in Baltimore, and that he was not the first of the high profile police shootings, but he was one of the more nationally known ones. I started reading about it, and the Baltimore Sun did a really interesting article about the history of police brutality just in Baltimore, which is a long and sad story.
Baltimore is not one of the big ones you think of, but I
Yeah,
understand that their history is pretty horrific,
it
even
is.
compared to a lot of the other ones that we generally think of as being bad.
Yeah, it is. It is. And
Well, Hagerstown had to get it from somewhere.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. We're sending our cops to
Oh,
Baltimore
God.
to get trained. Oh, good. That'll be great. And but what the thing that I realized was that, you know, the problem didn't start with Ferguson or Freddie Gray. It started, it's been going on for decades, and it's just now people are starting to notice who didn't notice before. Plenty of people, mostly people who live in those neighborhoods or have had those experiences, have known about it for years and just haven't been listened to by people like me. And now that it's gotten more national attention, like I had to sort of have this wake up moment where I was like, oh shit, like this isn't anything remotely new. This has been happening all along. And just think of how many people have been murdered by police in the last century whose names we will never know because their stories are buried in local newspapers or were never reported on at all. And, you know, and you realize that it's not like a new problem. It's just a problem that more people are noticing. And once you have had your eyes open to it, it's something that you just can't ignore, you know?
Well, most of most of the social problems that we deal with are not dealt with by the people who created them. They're, like I
No.
said about the gun rights thing, they're inherited. You know, the problem exists, and then the next generation has to deal with the fallout and has to address it and take care of it themselves. I mean, racism is a problem that is certainly not new. I mean, it goes back to day one in this country and beyond.
Yeah.
You know, the people who deal with the problems, the people who actually take the steps to address problems or to try to resolve them, are not the generation that created them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the solution clearly is we need to walk up to the white supremacists and make friends with them. and if you are a person of color and a policeman pulls his gun on you and is threatening you, even though you haven't done anything remotely threatening, I think you need to walk up to that policeman and you need to be his friend. Because clearly it's your responsibility, even though you've done nothing to deserve it. You've done nothing to provoke the situation at all. You're completely innocent and blameless. It's your responsibility to fix it.
Don't walk out of the Klan rally. Walk up to them and try to reason with them.
Ask if you can speak at their rally. That's the solution. Don't try to shut the rally down. Don't protest it. Ask if you can speak. Maybe ask if you can interview their leader, and then you can sit there on stage with the leader of the Klan, and you can nod politely and say, "Yeah, that's a good point," and you know it'll help.
I think Bill Maher could do that.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
That was episode 1, wasn't it?
Bill Maher was episode 1. Oh boy.
It's just when I first heard "walk up," I thought that was a joke. I really did.
It sounds like it could be.
Yeah. Our society has become so bizarre and so strange that parody can't keep up. Satire can't keep up. You read headlines about things that have happened or that that are happening in the federal government, and you have to wonder: is this satire or not? Facebook is actually trying to label satire sites to help clarify these things because reality is so ridiculous people can't tell anymore.
Yeah. Well, yeah, people have been sharing that. There was that joke front page that the Boston Globe put out like 2 years ago before the election. And the headline was, this deportations to begin.
Yeah, everything on that fake paper is basically happening now.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
I mean,
and what's also incredible is how completely predictable all of this clearly was, and that there's some people who still don't see it.
Yeah, because these are things that Trump specifically and the Republican Party in general has been saying they want to do all along. And somehow, for some reason, the people who vote Republican but claim that they don't support any of that, it's like they've just never heard about this before. Like, I never heard about, I just assumed that, they were just saying that. I didn't think he was going to actually try to ban Muslims from the country. I just thought that was something he just said to make us happy.
But I believe the lock are up, which he's not going through with.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
but that's the thing. Trump, as much of a problem as he is, he's just a symptom.
Yeah.
Trump by himself is impotent. He has no power whatsoever. It's the millions of people who are supporting him and saying, well, you know, now that the black guy isn't president, you should get behind the president, even if you don't like him. Yeah, the millions of people who are supporting him and enabling him and are pretending that what he's doing is all right is where the danger comes from. And that's a much bigger problem than simply that's not going to be solved by Mueller doing an indictment and getting him impeached. You know, that's a much bigger, more fundamental issue across the country. It's going to be a lot harder to deal with.
Yeah, and that's something that a lot of people who, for the most part, are on our side, it's like they've got it right in terms of Trump specifically, but they have failed to grasp the true depth and breadth of the problem. And I think even someone who I mentioned him already, Stephen Colbert, who I think is great, but he himself has said on his show, you know, that he thinks that Trump is the problem. And you know, and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, he is a problem, but as you said, he's a symptom.
He's the biggest one right now.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't come out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't just materialize. Millions of people voted for him, and even though we can say, yeah, well, Hillary won the popular vote, and you know, he doesn't have as much of a base of support as he would have us believe. That's all true, but 60-some million people voted for him, and one of the two major political parties in this country. We only have two political parties in this country that have any chance of winning elections on a national level. One of them is 100% behind Donald Trump and supported most of his platform before he even ran. Like, this is Republican 101, the stuff that they're doing or trying to do. And it's buoyed and it's founded on all of these notions of white supremacy and of male supremacy and of xenophobia and American exceptionalism and all this toxic bullshit that we have all been fed for our whole lives. And that's not something that's going to go away if we get rid of Trump. I would throw a party if they impeached Trump. I would think it would be a great day if they dragged his ass out of the White House in handcuffs. I don't think that's going to happen. But even if it did happen, all of the problems that lifted him up to that position in the first place are still going to be there.
Yeah, and we'll have the problem of liberals saying, well, Trump's out of office, our work here is done, and then they'll go and sit down and do nothing, and 2 years later we'll be right back where we started.
Exactly. You can't just show up once. You have to show up every time. Like, and that's the thing about Americans, because so many of us, I mean, a lot of people know this already, and I'm not trying to tell people something they don't already know, because people who, especially people who are, you know, impoverished or marginalized or disadvantaged, like, they know this already. They know that they have to stand up for themselves. They have to show up, or they could lose everything. But for a lot of the rest of us who are lucky enough to have it relatively easy, you know, it's easy to forget. Like, we are a complacent people, Americans in general. we are a very complacent people. And once we reach a plateau, we're like, okay, that's good. And we don't like to be told that we have to come back and keep doing it. But that's what we have to do.
So since we got in Trump, should we do the 5 minutes of Trump now?
Oh, yeah, why the hell not? Like, there he is. Look at him. Look at his...
Oh, wow, you got that up quick.
Look at his horrible face.
No. I don't have a Post-it note to put over that part of the monitor. Yeah. All right.
I'm so sorry. But yeah, so there's 5 minutes of Trump, and I will get the timer started here in a moment, and then we can just we'll just it'll, you know.
Yeah, because I had something. So I was going to say something not positive about him, but positive that's coming out of his administration here.
Go for it.
Okay, because something that's that's good about this is activism. We one of the things that the Republican Party is very good at is doing things very incrementally, very slowly. When they want to roll back abortion, they know they can't just pass a law and ban it. So they put in little laws, they chip away, they go a little bit at a time, and they think that as they work their way up, Republican will be in the White House, will be able to get the Supreme Court on their side. They do it a little bit at a time. And they get people used to things by throwing out some often terrible ideas and seeing how far they can go. They go right to the edge and they just hammer and hammer and hammer until people are used to it, and then they take another step and they hammer and hammer and hammer and so on. About, was it in the late 80s, David Duke, or early 90s, had made a public statement about how he wanted to build walls along the border and he wanted to deport people. And everyone was horrified by that. And the press was horrified. People vilified. They said only a former Klansman could come up with something that horrible. And it was just considered appalling. And now that is the actual Republican Party policy that we are following through on. Because in 30 years, it's gone from a horrific idea to something that they've got millions and millions of people in America to stand behind.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and what happened here, though, is Trump has come in, and he doesn't get any of this incrementalism stuff. He doesn't get anything with subtlety. He's jumping right to the end game. He's like, well, we want to put, special things on Muslims and ban them from the country, and we want to build walls, and we want to make America safe for white people and shoot homosexuals for sport and whatever goddamn things he's come up with. But what happened, it's like the analogy or parable or whatever of the frog in the pot of water, where if you put a frog into a pot where the water's already boiling, it'll scramble like mad to get out. But if you put it in room temperature and raise the temperature slowly, it'll cook in there because it doesn't notice the change happening so slowly. That's sort of where America has been here. We're very slowly being brought to our own destruction here on a lot of different issues. But with Trump, the people who normally would be sitting back and like not noticing are like, holy crap, what is going on here? And it's really pulling people out in ways that haven't happened in a generation or two. I mean, the rallies for for gun control or women's rights, or some of the things that we've seen since Trump became president, these are things that wouldn't happen without Trump being president. I don't think the contrast from what was to what is just so great that it's really drawing people out. Because for all the good things that I think about these kids from Parkland and what they're doing, if this same shooting had occurred with the same people and the same details in this country 10 years ago, I don't think it gets the same traction. Yeah, because I don't think America is as fed up 10 years ago as it is now.
I agree.
America's a lot more complacent.
It takes us a lot to get the point, I think. It takes, and things have to get so bad that enough of us just can't deny or smooth it over in our minds or rationalize it. And with Trump, yeah, I think you're right. He's so awful on every level. I mean, it's not just like a Nixon situation where, oh yeah, he's a terrible person, but I mean, he's at least competent and intelligent. It's like, no, he's just as bigoted and paranoid as Nixon was, but he has none of the skills. He's just a racist, uninformed, reactionary, impatient, vain dipshit who has no business doing the job that he's been given to do, and is therefore putting the entire world in a great deal of danger. And now it's like, oh, I see. Okay, yeah, we should do something about this.
And you've still got the millions of people who are like, well, you really should get behind him. He's doing well.
Yeah, it's like, what exactly should I support him doing? That's what I would love to know. Like, what exactly is he trying to do that I should be behind? He's
trying to get illegal immigrants out of the country, even if he has to pass laws to take ones who are legal to make them illegal to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And also invent outright lies about hordes of immigrants flooding across the border, even though border crossings are like at a 40-year low or something. It's.
Well, I wonder why they're at a 40-year low. Who wants to come here at this point?
Right. I'm surprised they're not at a 40-year high going the other way. People are like.
And on that note, time.
Time's up.
Oh, what was it? There's something on that thing I was going to say that isn't necessarily Trump, but and it came to me and it went out of my head again. Shoot.
Oh, don't you hate that?
Yeah. Oh man, it'll come to me once it's too late.
Once the show is over. Oh, I know what it was. It was brilliant too.
Yeah, brilliant might be a little strong because when I remember, I don't want to oversell it in advance. But it was this. One of the big things about requiring gun or wanting gun ownership and supporting it and not having restrictions. They say one of the big arguments is that you need guns to protect yourself from the government in case it becomes tyrannical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take a look at our government right now. We have, they're talking about, Trump was talking about printing lists of crimes committed by Muslims and immigrants.
Yeah.
He was, the ICE is basically our Gestapo. It's breaking up families and kicking people who've been in the country for 40 years out, and they have absolutely nowhere to go. At what point do you think that the government actually becomes tyrannical? Why are you not paying attention, or is it just that they're being tyrannical to people who aren't white, and so it's okay?
Yeah, once they start raising taxes on the wrong people, then or telling ranchers that they have to follow the rules when they graze their cattle on federal land.
Yeah, because the government right now, we're seeing tyranny in government, and it's just aimed at people who they're okay with it happening to.
Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, private citizens are being in the worst case scenarios are being outright murdered by police, and in much larger numbers they're being unfairly targeted for arrest and prosecution. And the racial inequalities, not just in law enforcement but in the political or the criminal justice system, are appalling. The cases of people of color who are charged more often than white people, are convicted more often than white people, and once convicted are given disproportionately harsh sentences compared to white people who committed the same crimes. And somehow that's not evidence of a government that needs to be reformed, but when Cliven Bundy and his dipshit sons get pissed off because the Bureau of Land Management says, okay, 20 years of illegally grazing your cows on our property is enough. We're going to need you to pay us some fucking back fees or get the fuck out. Now all of a sudden that's like, oh, that's intolerable.
And they pointed sniper rifles at federal agents.
Yeah.
Who black people are disrespecting by kneeling during the national anthem.
Yeah, exactly. White people can actually point guns at federal agents and walk away scot-free. But if a black athlete takes a knee during the national anthem, it's unacceptable. Or if a black person responds to a police officer who has his gun on him by putting his hands up and saying, I'm unarmed, and then the police officer shoots him anyway, somehow the police officer is able to walk away without facing any kind of punishment, and no reform is put in place to stop that from happening again. But but let's wait for the government. Yeah,
was it Freddie Gray or one of the other ones who had his back broken when in police custody?
That was Freddie Gray. Yeah,
that does not happen by accident. If you're in police custody, you don't just like the van goes around a corner too fast and you hit the wall and you break. No, that takes a hell of a lot of effort.
Yeah, he was, and that's one of that's one of those things in that Baltimore Sun article that they talked about, that the Baltimore police has a history of that specific thing, of taking suspects for what they call them nickel rides, where they intentionally will not secure them properly in the van, and then will give them a very, very rough ride, on purpose to jar them or to injure them. And like the Baltimore Police Department has a history of doing just that, and that's exactly what it seems like they did to Freddie Gray.
Oh man, it's just, and there are people who will still argue that there's not a racial issue in this country.
Oh man, there was a guy, I assume it was a guy, just taking a guess. I don't know for sure, but the odds are in my favor when I say it's a guy, who was responding to the SSJCon hashtag yesterday during the Secular Social Justice Conference. One of the speakers was talking about racial disparities in the way school students are punished. And
was that the one that went? They found it goes back all the way to like preschool.
Yeah. There are black kids in preschool are punished more severely than white kids in preschool. And there have been other studies in elementary school and middle school. Like there have been multiple studies to suggest that white adults, have an implicit bias against black students, and they perceive them to be innately more disruptive or more dangerous or whatever than white students. And again, it's not something that's in our genes. It's something we're socialized with, but most of us aren't aware of it. And it's become sadly a fact of our society, and it affects people's lives. It causes, black students to be disciplined more often when maybe a white kid would be let off the hook or be given a less harsh punishment. And it starts this cycle of disciplinary action that is difficult to break out of, that for many people carries on into adulthood, where they...
And then white people say, why can't they just get a college education and do better for themselves? Well,
yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah, gee. I wonder what the problem is. But yeah, and there was this dipshit on Twitter who was like, well, I'm going to need to see evidence of this. And and eventually, the other Stephanie Zvan was responding to him as well, and she eventually told him to Google it. And I was going to say that initially I was, and I ended up sort of stepping back because I thought, I'm not going to argue with this asshole on Twitter while I'm here. I mean, I have better things to do. But
you'll argue with him today.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, but yeah, it's just like, you're so skeptical of this fairly well evidenced and not even controversial to begin with claim that black people are treated more harshly than white people in school. Like there's evidence to support that, and given what else we know about the way American society works, it's not a far-fetched claim at all. But I'm gonna withhold judgment until I personally have read the study on that.
Well, these are the same people who honestly don't believe that there's any connection between Trump and Russia, but who do believe that Hillary Clinton was running a child sex ring out of a pizza parlor.
Yeah, out of the basement of a pizza parlor that does not have a basement. Oh yeah.
You cannot reason with this kind of mindset. You can't reason with it.
No.
And I don't try a whole lot anymore, simply because unless there's an audience there, I don't. Because when you're arguing things like that with people like that, your goal is not to convince the person you're arguing with. Your goal is to try to get some thoughts into the heads of the people who are watching. Because if somebody's making an argument that's stupid, you're not going to get through.
No.
You're not going to change your mind. But maybe you can make some points that make some other people watching go, and make them think, and that's a more realistic goal.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have my patience for conversations like that is basically exhausted at this point. I mean, unless there's some greater purpose being served, like you said, like if there's an audience and maybe you could, educate someone else who's watching. I mean, if someone, because like I've come to believe very strongly that, and I actually my video that goes up on this channel tomorrow is about this. Like, there are...
You have a channel?
Yeah, I know, right? There are honest disagreements. Sometimes people, even if they haven't accepted all the facts, they have heard all the facts. There's nothing that you can tell them that's going to make them go, oh, I didn't know that, I'm completely changing my mind. Like sometimes there's just an honest disagreement that is intractable and irreconcilable, and that's just the way it is. And in cases like that, to me, it's best to just walk away, because I'm not going to keep arguing with someone who has made up their mind, and there's nothing I can tell them that they don't already know that's going to change their mind. And it's just, this is not a good use of my time.
You need some sort of common ground in order to have any sort of productive discussion. If you got two people who are this close on issues but are disagreeing a little bit, and you can meet in the center. But if you got two people who are this far apart, you're not going to reach each other. So there's really not a lot of point in trying.
Yeah,
if you need to have some middle ground that you're both able to reach, or else it's doomed from the start.
Yeah, exactly. If you say the sky is blue and I say the sky is, like neon green or something, I mean, there's no middle ground there. If you say that's a tree and I say no, that's the Houston Astrodome, Like, how do you resolve that conflict? There's no way.
Yeah, you cannot resolve a conflict with people who are unencumbered by facts as well.
Yeah. It's like, you know what? I'm just gonna walk away. You know? Because it's obviously the Astrodome. Anyone can see that.
Well, most places it's a tree, but if you're actually in the right spot in Houston, you're pointing, it could very well be the Astrodome.
Maybe. Is the Astrodome still there? Did they tear it down, or is it still there?
I think that's still there.
Oh, yeah.
So were they using that as some sort of staging ground for disaster relief when they had the flooding with the hurricane?
Maybe they were. Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah. Then Puerto Rico got hit, and but it's not Houston, so who cares, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, they have the same problems we have, and maybe even a little worse.
Things there are, in many regions, much of Puerto Rico is not even close to repaired, even as we start to enter the next hurricane season.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But in Texas and Florida, we'll be here as long as we need to. Mm-hmm. Okay. But Puerto Rico is an island. It's surrounded by water, big water. And it's complicated because there aren't such things as helicopters and airplanes and boats.
Didn't he say it's hard to get stuff across the ocean to Puerto Rico?
Yes, it's Puerto Rico. It's not even that far away. We've shipped relief supplies halfway around the world. We can't. Oh my God.
People have made it farther in 57 Chevys modified into boats from Cuba.
It's Puerto Rico.
And the United States military can't get stuff there?
Yeah, exactly. We're the greatest country in the world. We've landed people on the moon. We have a military second to none, blah, 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 American exceptionalism. We're the best. Oh, what? Puerto Rico needs some hurricane relief? I don't know. That's going to be tough. Come on.
Walk up, not out. Can't do anything about gun violence.
Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. Well, on that note,
wasn't some of the disaster relief in Puerto Rico they said to apply online in regions that didn't have electricity?
Yeah, I don't have electricity, but let me make sure. Let me just check and see if I have a Wi-Fi signal. Nope. Sorry. I mean, yeah, but I think we should wrap up because
a little bit shorter episode than normal because we started a little bit later.
Yeah, and also because I have another engagement. I'm recording a podcast at 3.
Okay.
And I don't want Jason to get all pouty.
Like Pierre.
Yeah, like Pierre.
Oh,
Where
man.
were you for this show? Shut up.
Yeah, so we're not going to do our normal Star Trek or Batman or whatever segment at the end here.
No,
so.
I can't afford to go to 4 today.
We have gone a bit long at times. So.
It's, a somewhat shorter show is...
Yeah. Actually, wasn't our goal when we started to basically do shows that are about an hour long, and we have never come in under 70 minutes?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's tough because there's no one to tell us to shut up.
Yeah, because both of our wives leave the room and don't come back until we're done.
Exactly. I was talking. It's funny. I'll mention this real quick because it's somewhat related, and then we'll wrap up for real. I was talking to my wife about how ever since the WWE started doing shows on its own network for their big shows, they just have no sense of time management at all. Like last year WrestleMania, counting the pre-show, ran close to 7 hours.
God.
And WrestleMania is today. This year's WrestleMania is today, and I didn't watch last year, and I won't be watching this year, but. It's the same. People are figuring it's the same thing because they have their own network now. So nobody. It's not like the cable companies are going to be like, hey, you only bought 3 hours of satellite time for the pay-per-view. It's like they're just like, fuck it, we're going to go as long as we want. And there's no sense of, well, maybe we should try to put on a show that is of a watchable length.
Wasn't that We've come a long way from the time when they would occasionally buy an hour of prime time on an actual network, major network, to do a show.
Yeah, and the bullshit.
Wasn't that whole Mega Powers nonsense thing wrapped up on the tag team?
It was Saturday night's main event. Yeah, it was, which was Saturday night's main event was a replacement for Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live does 3 shows a month, and then on the 4th Saturday, when they didn't do a new Saturday Night Live, they did a Saturday night's main event. And it was the same length as Saturday Night Live. It was 90 minutes. And that was tight. Like you can't not 91 minutes, you know, like that's it. That's all the time you get. And that was actually the perfect length because with commercials it was only a little bit over an hour of actual content, and that's the perfect length for a wrestling show.
It'll be a lot harder to watch these 7-hour ones years later and actually wade through it all.
Oh God. Well, yeah, because and I mean, there's no
reason to.
I haven't been paying attention to it that closely, but I've been following it here and there. And I mean, I say this as a lifelong fan. It doesn't sound like I'm missing anything. You know, it's just like, oh God. It's just because there's so much of it. There's a 3-hour show on Monday every week. There's a 2-hour show on Tuesday every week.
And don't they like have a pay-per-view every month too?
They have a pay-per-view every month, and now the
so all the important stuff you're going to have to pay for anyway.
Yeah,
so
the pay-per-views are all 3 hours and sometimes longer because again they're on the WWE network, so they can go as long as they want. And then WrestleMania is like at least 4 hours, and the last couple years much longer. And it's just like, God, who has the fucking time? I love wrestling, and even if I was still watching WWE, like I just, how could I can't watch fucking 8 hours of wrestling a week on a week when there's a pay-per-view. Like that's absurd. How could you expect people to do that? I got shit to do, and I work from home, and I don't even have a job where I leave the house for most of the day. Like I can't watch 8 hours of wrestling a week. I've got shit to do.
He's got a new football league to put together.
Oh God.
And on that charming note, we will wrap up here because you do need to be elsewhere. And
yeah.
So, another good show.
Yeah.
Another major issue solved by two white guys talking on the internet.
You know, what would the world do without us?
I'm sure there'd be some other basis for hate. People have a tendency.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess. So,
on that cheery, upbeat note.
We didn't fix anything. Everything is hopeless. We're all fucked. Goodbye, everybody.
Was that an Onion article that was posted today? Beleaguered sighing climate scientists say to just enjoy the next 20 years as much as you can.
I didn't see that. That's perfect. Oh, we laugh so we don't cry.
Yep. All right. Well, take care, and we'll see you, I would assume, next month, unless we screw... I have a calendar up here you can't see. That's why I was turning my head over there. Like I don't know that May comes after April, so I have to check the calendar. But I assume we'll be doing another episode in May?
Yes, I would assume
just like
so.
Unless we have another March incident where it doesn't happen.
A March incident. Yeah, we'll try to avoid any further March incidents. We'll see y'all in May.
Yeah, because otherwise Pierre will get all snippy with us.
Oh, God, we can't have that. All right, folks.
All right, until next time, everyone.
Bye, everybody.